How's everybody doing today? This segment, we're going to focus on interviewing skills. First, our quote of the day. Abraham Lincoln once said, "I'm a success today because I had a friend who believed in me, and I didn't have the heart to let him down." I want to talk about interview preparation, which includes learning about your target companies, researching potential interviewers, practicing interviewing questions that you may be asked, and also going over questions that you should be asking. Now, then we're going to discuss things that you should never say or do, and then I'll close the section by discussing what we should bring to an interview. You're going to find a workbook in the resource section, so it's not necessary to write all these questions down now. Just listen now, and then you can create answers to the questions by yourself when you go through the workbook section. Now, interviewing is a major part of the career process, and when we work with clients, we usually spend weeks on this section. So this will be more of an executive summary, but the workbook you'll find is quite detailed, so we're going to be pretty thorough with you. Every battle is won before it's fought. This, of course, means preparation, preparation, and more preparation. I want you to not only research the company and potential interviewers, but also the company website, go to LinkedIn. These are good places to start to identify who might be interviewing you. Try to find out one or two personal things about each potential interviewer. With regard to the company, be prepared to answer the following questions. How would you summarize their business in one or two sentences? What are the organization's key products and/or services? Identify, or at least be aware of, how many employees do they have? How big is the company? What industry are they in? What are the drivers of success in that industry? Who's the president and the key directors? How long has the company been around? Now, after reading news about the organization, describe one or two key pieces of information about them, like revenue growth. Try to be specific with numbers like 4.5 million in revenue, representing 3.8% growth over the last 6 months. Also, what are the firm's products and services? Are there any new announcements? Has there been anything in the news lately about this? What can you share that you're familiar with about this company? Now, think about any application barrier talking points. What I mean by that is there any reason you feel that you may not be qualified to be an employee there? Is there anything in your resume or any missing qualification that you think might be a problem? Now, once again, you can refer to the section that we have on turning weaknesses into strengths, but start thinking about this. Is there anything potentially missing? Okay, now I'm going to walk through around 25 potential interview questions that you should practice beforehand. Most of these questions, there's no correct answer. They're looking to see how you answer the question. They want to see if there's a structure to your logic. The bell chimes. But each is a potentially dangerous area where you'll be given the opportunity to blow yourself up. So please be thoughtful when answering questions of this nature. Are you ready? Let's do it. Have you ever been on a team that was going through major changes? When a business makes changes, some people adapt quickly while others struggle. Your answer should show that you're in the first group. You've got a professional example of going through change, and talk about that. How did you adapt to the new way of doing things? How did you support your colleagues? It's even better if you can talk about benefiting from the change. For example, if your old employer was making a change and you saw an opportunity to implement a long overdue process improvement. Next question. Have you ever interacted with a colleague in a way that you regret? Well, we've all snapped at colleagues who maybe didn't deserve it or bitten our tongue when we should have said something. So it's okay to talk about mild conflicts with former workers, as long as you're not too negative. If an interviewer asks you about regret, focus on what you learned from the experience and how it helped you to improve and become a better person and a better worker. Are you a better communicator now than you were before? If you really don't want to admit a fault like this, you can swerve the question slightly by saying you regret not thanking someone enough for their help in the past. Have you ever had to deal with a customer or a client who didn't speak the same language as you? Be careful with questions like this. because you could really get yourself into trouble if you say something that's even remotely discriminatory or derogatory. Also, remember that customers must always be treated with the utmost respect. Focus on how you solved the problem, what steps you took, how did you communicate with this person, were they happy with the outcome. If you don't have an example dealing with the language barrier, it's okay to talk about an occasion where there was any kind of communication issue. Communication is vital in every job, and employers want somebody who can overcome barriers, because you're always going to run into this, not just because of language, but communication barriers are probably what most sources of conflict at work are about. All right. Have you ever said something wrong to a customer? If you have an example of this, you need to focus on why you knew it was the wrong thing, how it affected the customer, and what you did to rectify the situation. Don't worry about casting yourself in a negative light, as long as the story isn't too terrible. The interviewer isn't really interested about how you fixed your mistake, rather than the mistake yourself, or actually they're more interested in how you fixed it, rather than the mistake itself. Talk about what you learned from the experience and how you now avoid saying or doing the wrong thing. You may have heard the story about Abraham Lincoln. He was working in a store and he shortchanged somebody. And at the end of the day, when he realized that he ran 4 miles to that person to give them the correct change. So we're thinking about things like this. That's a good example. Have you ever had to change your hair or clothes for an employer? Well, lots of people run up against dress codes either in school or at work. So if you have a practical example, discuss it with the interviewer. A question like this sometimes is more about conflict resolution and teamwork. How did you discuss the issue with your manager? How did you arrive in an agreement? Your answer should show that you're responsible and cooperative. However, if you have something important, such as a piercing that you're not willing to remove, it's best to be upfront about that with the interviewer if you think it's going to be a potential problem at work. Now let's talk about tell me questions. In most interviews, there are some questions that are just bound to come up. The classic, tell me about yourself, icebreakers. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. And the way you respond is going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. When an interviewer phrases questions with the tell me as an opportunity to show your personality or use an anecdote or story that explains the answer, check out the tell me questions below and use them as a guide to feel confident about your response. So here we go. Tell me a few things about yourself. Consider beginning by sharing a few personal interests, they don't have to relate to work. Your answer should focus on experiences and skills that may be relevant to the position or the company for which you're interviewing. Turn your answer into a concise, compelling pitch that illustrates why you're the right pick for the job. Tell me why I should hire you. Prepare by making a list of qualifications for the position, then determine how to discuss your qualities that will meet specific job requirements. Your answer should be brief and should highlight why you stand out among other applicants. If you possess questions that make you unique in the candidates pool, emphasize these when answering the questions. Tell me about your preferred work environment. Interviewers generally ask this question to determine how well you'll fit in at the new company. Be honest, but be sure to let the interviewer know you're adaptable. Do a bit of research on the company culture by checking out the About section on the company's website. Make sure to use words like flexible. Tell me about a project or improvement that you've spearheaded. Now, ideally here, you want to be able to talk about something work-related, but don't panic if you don't have any examples. Talk about any situation where you had a major challenge and tell your story in steps. First, talk about the nature of the challenge you faced. Then talk about how you analyzed the problem and identified the solution. After that, talk about implementing the solution and how you measured success. This question is mostly about problem-solving ability. Do you leap in blind? Do you carefully step through things to arrive at a solution? Here's a good place to employ the SWOT framework, which is strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. Next, Tell me about a time you went the extra mile for a client or a customer. Don't forget the Abraham Lincoln story. But it helps if you know the values of the employer when answering a question like this. Companies that focus on service want to hear extraordinary tales of helping people. Companies that emphasize value or efficiency would like to hear about how you were able to help customers while staying focused on your job. Walk through the answer in steps. Visiting the company's About page on their website should give you some insight as to what type of company you're dealing with. Now, first talk about what it was that the customer needed, demonstrate empathy, and show that you put yourself in the customer's shoes. Then discuss what you decided to do next. What were the options available to you? Did you choose the best one? It's another chance to show your strategic and analytical thinking. And finally, remember to talk about the benefit of what you did. Was the client happy? Did it lead to a stronger relationship? Did it prevent a loss of business? Did you help your employer avoid a liability? You may want to include words like exceeded, outperformed, reorganized, re-engineered, redesigned, increased, improved, or boosted. And once again, check out the resource section where I give you a lot of words you can use for situations like this. Next question. Tell me about a time you found it difficult to work with a colleague or you had a difficult colleague to work with. Once again, don't ever say anything negative about former colleagues because it can often reflect badly on you. You may come across as someone who's not a team player, so your answers need to focus on teamwork and cooperation. Talk about how you resolved the situation or stopped it from having such an effect on the team. Be sure to use words like understanding, patient, and flexible. Next question. Tell me about a time you had to persuade someone about something. Situational questions like tell me about should be answered with the STAR approach, which is situation, task, action, result. Talk about the situation you were in, the thing you needed to persuade someone about, the action you took to persuade them, and the outcome of your efforts. The interviewer is looking to assess particular qualities here, namely your communication and persuasion skills. So your answer should illustrate the degree to which you possess these skills. Ideally, give them an example of professional life, but once again, you can always talk about your personal life if you don't have an example of your professional life. How do you go about talking people into things? I mean, it's that simple. Okay, semi-related to traditional question. Where do you think this company will be in 5 years? Now here, it'll be great if you do some research to know the company's strategic goals and any new product or product lines or areas they're looking at heading in. Maybe there's a merger coming up. Focus on concrete details in your answers. Ask the interviewer what they think about them. If you don't have any examples, then talk about the industry in general. If you can mention any articles or blog posts that you've read about the future of the industry, be sure to mention those. If you don't have an answer, turn the question around and ask the interviewer, what are the company's goals? If you can engage the interviewer in discussions about this, it shows that you have some understanding of what they do. Okay, could you work for a manager who's younger than you? First of all, questions like this should always be answered in the affirmative. Yes, I can. No matter what, yes. Now, in every job, they want employees who are good team players and work well with everyone else. So if you have an experience of working with a boss who's younger than you, be sure to talk about what it was like. Be positive, and talk about what you learned and what you enjoyed. Remember, a question like this is being asked in the context of anti-discrimination laws. Neither you nor the interviewer can say anything derogatory about anyone based on their age, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexuality. So don't make jokes. Even if you think they're not offensive, don't take that chance. Where do you see yourself in 6 months? Now, this, of course, is a challenging variation on the where do you see yourself in 5 years chestnut. But keep in mind, the first 6 months of any job are really spent training and generally learning the ropes. And this should be the focus of your answer. If you know you'll be learning a particular skill set, be sure to focus on that. It shows that you understand what's expected of you and what you need to learn. Are you primarily motivated by salary or opportunity? The correct answer here depends on the point you're at in your current career. Those starting out in their career path should generally be willing to take a pay cut in exchange for training and development. You should also be at a point in your career where you should need a solid, reliable remuneration package, and you're not worried about advancement. And it's okay to say this. Now take some cues from the interviewer and get a feeling for what they want from their employee. Do you like to deal with customers or stay in the back office? Every job involves dealing with customers to some extent. Even if you're not dealing with external customers, you still have to deal with internal customers, or people you work with, people from other departments who need your services. Now, it's okay to say you prefer to do back office work, but be careful not to sound like you have trouble dealing with people. Talk about how you like to devote your attention to a task, for example. If you're good with customers, this is positive. Give examples of times you provided top-class customer service. Next question. Who's your role model? Now, avoid mentioning any celebrities who might be controversial, such as political leaders or contemporary pop stars. Remember, you can talk about someone you know. It can be a parent or teacher, someone you know that they don't. The interviewer is going to ask this question about your role model to find out what you admire about them. They want to know how you think and what's important to you. They're really looking for what inspires you. So the quality of your role model should be something you want your interviewer to associate with your work ethic, your entrepreneurial spirit, creativity, for example. So give this one some thought. Don't just spurt out anything, because it can be really helpful if you have the right answer for this, or a good answer. The main thing is don't be negative. Think of somebody non-controversial. Okay. Next question. Who is the leading company in our field, which is, and what is it they're doing right? So who are their competition? What do they do right? If you don't know the industry very well, pick an obvious example that you feel comfortable talking about. You know, the big ones, of course, are Apple, McDonald's, Airbnb, Uber. Try to find something you like about the company in question, whether it's quality, customer service, or price. Once again, do some research on this before you get there. Know something about some other companies that you can use as examples of good service, good production, good manufacturing, whatever. But do some research, be armed, because this question comes up in many different ways. And once again, the purpose is to determine how familiar you are with the industry. So the better equipped you are to answer, the better off you'll be. So once again, do a little research here. Next question, who are our customers? This is the most important question to any business. And if you know the answer, there's a good chance you'll be able to help the company realize its strategic vision. If you don't, whatever the company sells, whether it's hamburgers or houses, it's aimed at a particular customer. So think about what the business, the company is offering, and see what clues they provide. Business, retail, budget, luxury. You won't be able to answer this question unless you research the employer beforehand. So once again, spend some time on their website. Better yet, buy something from them. Become a customer yourself. They'll appreciate that. What industry news sources do you follow? Interviewers want to be sure that you work to keep your skills sharp. You know what's going on. You're not dated. You're not obsolete. Especially in fields like tech. So you need to read industry news, and this will help you stay connected and demonstrate that you are connected. Mention any magazines, blogs, forums, social media feeds, or other outlets you're familiar with. If you can talk about a recent article or post, it could make all the difference. If you keep in touch with industry developments in other ways, such as talking to friends who work in the industry, feel free to mention that as well. Okay. Who are you, and what do you do to relax? When answering a question like this, steer clear of anything that might make you seem unprofessional. Drugs and alcohol are major no-nos. Things like video games and watching trash TV make you seem unambitious? Sports and exercise are great answers, as things like reading, crafting, attending cultural events. If you have a noteworthy hobby, then talk about it. It shows you have an active and curious mind. It can also help you stand out from other candidates. The interviewer will remember you as the one who collects rare vinyl, or the person who makes stained glass. A related question is, what's the biggest accomplishment of your non-working life? Who are you outside of work? What are your values? What matters most to you? Now, these are things an interviewer wants to know when they're asking a question like this. If they're asking specifically about your personal life, you're free to talk about anything. It can include sporting victories, artistic creations, volunteer work, or your relationship with your family. But if you can tie things into work, better yet. However, it's better to take a moment to talk about who you really are rather than trying to get the conversation back to your resume. Because they want to know who you are. And they want to know who you are because they want to know, are you a fit for this organization? So keep that in mind when answering this and how you can demonstrate that you're a fit. What previous experiences do you have in this role? Your resume contains most of the information about your experience, so this question is a chance to hear about your experience in your own words, to elaborate, to provide detail. If the interviewer asks generally about your experience, rather than asking about something specific on your resume, then they're asking you about how your experience is relevant to this particular role. This means the question is partially about how you perceive the requirements of the role. Research the job as much as possible before attending the interview. I mean, once again, this is obvious. Research the job, research the company, make sure you understand what's in that job description, and you can repeat all of that, and you can demonstrate that you have the experience or qualities to meet every one of the things that they mention in their job description. Next question, what's your motto? Some interviewers may use this variation as the old describe yourself in 5 words questions. The goal here is to put you on the spot and hope you might reveal something about your true self. Good mottos can include proverbs such as, make hay while the sun shines. You could also use a quote from a leader or a thinker whom you admire, or something that a parent or teacher once said to you. The interviewer will probably ask a follow-up question about how this motto influences you in daily life. So be prepared to talk about your motto in a little detail. But if it's something common, that's great too, Nike, just do it. But think through this. Have this question prepared before you go there, because you can use this in many different forms. So do some research, be thoughtful. Would you be willing to relocate temporarily? Now, some employers may want you to spend some time at another location in order to get training or meeting staffing needs. Now, for questions like this, be positive and flexible, but don't say anything that's not true. If you're unable or unwilling to move, you should let the employer know that right off the bat. If the interviewer asks you to make some kind of major commitment, such as relocation, it's okay to ask for more detail at the time and even to think about it. Even if they're only asking this hypothetically, it shows that you think through things before rushing into them. Okay, so those are those 25 questions. Now I want to change gears a little because there are additional types of interview questions. And I've broken these into 6 categories. There's work history, work style, analytical capabilities, organizational abilities, consultative abilities, and fit within the organization. Now, first let me just read these. Questions about your history. Why did you leave your last job? Have you ever been fired or forced to resign? Questions about working style. When have you had to use your presentation skills to influence someone's opinion? Walk me through the steps you took to reach an important long-term goal. Questions about your analytical style. What experience do you have with reporting tools, metrics, dashboards, and scorecards? What technical aspects of your last job did you have to learn? Questions about organizational abilities. What project management experience do you have? How do you keep track of tasks and activities to ensure that everything is going according to plan? Describe a complex project you worked on recently. When have you created a strategic plan? What was the level of its scope and complexity that you experienced in creating the plan? Which engagement strategies do you have to obtain buy-in from others in the organization as you move the strategic plan forward? Questions regarding cultural fit within an organization. If I were to call your references after our interviewer, what are they likely to say about you? List 10 things you can do with the pencil. You've got 15 seconds. Can you think on the spot questions? All right. Now we're going to move to the other side of the desk. 16 questions you can ask during an interview. What are the most misunderstood aspects of your business model or of your business by investors and potential customers? What are the gaps in your company's product portfolio? What do you think are the best long-term opportunities for this company? I read the company's annual report and I have a question about ... I listened to the company's most recent earnings call and I have a question about. I was doing research on the industry and I noticed that competitor X has a different strategy. How do you think that affects your bottom line? What is the culture like at your company, and is it the reason that you're more successful than your competitors? How long have you been at the company? Always great to get the interviewer talking, and especially things that are both related personal, because they like to talk about themselves, but also about the company. So any question along those lines is great. What advice would you give someone at my level in terms of what I need to be more productive or add more value? How did you start at this company? What did you find the biggest challenges when you were a new employee here? How has the current administration changing policy affected your strategy? Can you tell me more about the day-to-day responsibilities of the job? What are your expectations for this role during the first 30 days? What are the biggest challenges facing the company or department right now? What do you like best about working here? What's the typical career path for somebody in this role? What are the next steps in the interview process? So these are all great ways to, good questions to ask. They're fair, they show that you're interested, and they'll get the interviewer talking. Now do remember to avoid questions about salary, benefits, or turnover. You should vary the complexity of your question depending on the level of the interviewer. Interviewers that are more senior will not consider you a threat, so you can ask them the more complicated questions. You may potentially threaten interviewers with job positions closer to your level. So in those interviews, it's better to keep those questions simpler and lighter. They're going to be looking at you more closely to see if you're a threat or somebody that they would enjoy working with. All right, interview strategies. What to avoid saying or doing during an interview. Certain things you just shouldn't say during an interview. Now, there are going to be times you're going to disagree with the interviewer. When that happens, just say, I disagree. Or actually, don't say it like that. When you disagree, use words like, I feel, I think, it appears to me. It's better than outright saying, I disagree. Okay. In the interview, do not bring up compensation, benefits, or turnover. Don't use words or phrases like honestly or to tell you the truth, because this makes the interviewer believe that you weren't being honest before or truthful. Don't cross your arms or legs during an interview. Don't look down. That tells the interviewer that you're closed or you're not forthcoming. You don't want to oversell. You know that you're doing well if the interviewer starts saying positive things about the company. This means that they're now trying to sell you on the company. In all likelihood at that point, they'll be more relaxed. This is your sign to stop selling. Try not to ramble. If you get tough questions, you have no idea where to start, instead of rambling, try to apply a process, such as SWOT analysis, once again, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. Okay, what should you bring to an interview? Bring 10 copies of your resume. As many times interviewers are disorganized, they don't have copies, or they have the email somewhere, they don't know what it is. It's better to have a printed out copy for them they could put right in front of them. It also shows that you are prepared. It's Good idea to bring some NutriBars with you, as oftentimes the interviewer is going to forget to feed you, especially if you're there all day and you've got multiple back-to-back interviews. Good to bring a bottle of water, which you can keep in your bag and drink between interviews if they forget to offer you some. Good idea to bring a notebook to write down follow-up items for an interview, because sometimes you don't have an answer. And don't take any chances. I know this may sound bizarre, but having the wrong pen can negatively impact your interviewer's perception of you. I had a friend once that used a pen with the logo of a competitor, which the interviewer noticed and mentioned in the interview. So to quote the late former CEO of Intel, Andy Grove, "Only the paranoid survive." Now, you should also have a classy and conservative bag to carry your interview items in. Now remember, this is a lot of extra work, but you're doing it because your competition won't do it. Now, if you follow everything I've given you here, you go through the workbook, you go through all the questions, you answer them from your perspective, you're going to be in great shape. You're also going to find in the workbook, I have templates that I've created. And these are for ideas that you can give to an interviewer to show that you've done something or you're willing to do something. And once again, this is going to make you better prepared than everyone else. And that's going to give you the confidence to enjoy and do exceptionally well in your interview. Remember, the more prepared you are, the better you feel, the more confident you'll be, the better you're going to come across. So, hopefully you got all that. If you go through the workbook, if you have any questions, as always, email me. I'd love to help you. So until next time, remember, if you want to live a happy life, tie it to a goal, not to people or stuff. This is Joe Pastore with Platinum Method Coaching, and we'll see you next time.